Let's go with Destroyer on the left-hand side because we're already going to have an 8-power Bucky Barnes in the mid lane to help us like start swinging that rocket. Oh my gosh! Oh no way! So he dropped Professor X. Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another Marvel Snap video. So it's that time again, the daily reset, where we're able to pull a mystery card, and then we're going to draft a deck around that card. But really quickly before we pull the card, we're creating daily Marvel Snap content, so if you're enjoying the videos, if you like Marvel Snap, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel expand and grow. Alright, with that being said, let's go ahead and pull the card. We're going to rip the band-aid off, something good. Destroyer. So this is a card that I have thought about. Destroyer being a 6-cost, 14-power card that on reveal destroy your other cards. So how can that be good? How can we make that good with such a hard condition? There's a couple of ways. We could sneak it into a 0 combo, which feels okay, but not great. And then there are a few other ways to kind of ramp into it or cheat it out that we might be able to utilize that ability and not have as much of a downside. So let's take a real quick look and see if we're able to draft anything that might be good. Okay, so instead of going through the entire process where I'm kind of debating over cards, I wanted to run through the cards that I chose and then alternatives that I considered. That way you can still kind of get the process of why I chose which cards I did, and maybe you have other cards that I don't that would slot into this, and I'll cover those as well. So first I want to cover how can you use Destroyer. With an on-reveal that destroys your other cards, it seems almost unusable at 6 power. Well, there's a couple of ways. You can either use a Cosmo to stop your card, stop the downside of your cards being destroyed. You can use a 0 to stop that effect. You can protect your cards with something like armor, or you can lean in and you can want your cards destroyed. Those cards being cards like Wolverine, Sabretooth, to an extent. You want it destroyed before you drop Destroyer, so you can drop it back down at 0 power or 0 cost. And so with this deck, we really lean into that. So we go with some really low power cards that benefit from being destroyed. So Bucky Barnes, for example, Nova, Wolverine, Sabretooth, all benefit from being destroyed. And I'll run through the individual abilities really quickly, but that's the general idea. And then our other tech cards around that, we have Deathlock and Carnage to manually initiate the destruction if we need to. We have Armor to protect one of our lanes so that we can stack some of our better cards there that we don't want to be killed. Then we have Rogue. Rogue is just really strong right now with all of the powerful ongoing abilities that I've almost slotted her into every deck that I have made since I've pulled her. She's just really strong right now. If the meta kind of shifts away from ongoing abilities, then maybe we pull her out and we tech in something like a Killmonger for 1-drops, or some other kind of counter. Maybe we go full Enchantress. Maybe we go Shang-Chi if we're seeing a lot of high power cards. This is one that you can kind of tech in and out as you need to. So a couple of cards that I think would be good additions to this deck list to make it run even more optimally. I think Deadpool could be a pretty powerful card in this destroy archetype, because with this we have Carnage that destroys, we have Deathlock that destroys. We could throw Killmonger in the place of Rogue to have a third destruction mechanism to allow Deadpool to trigger several times. And then of course, prior to turn 6, you would want to drop him into an armored lane or somewhere that's protected so that you can drop your Destroyer and not have to worry. I think Death fits perfectly in this deck archetype. So if we had Death, we would want to tech Rogue out for a Killmonger and hope that they had some 1-drop cards we could trigger Death with. Ideally, you could drop both of these on turn 6. You could drop Destroyer and Death by turn 6 and have Death be almost free. But I feel like Death is a good kind of substitute for the games that you don't draw your Destroyer. It's another high power card that you can kind of cheat out onto the board by operating within her effect. And so now to really quickly run through all of the cards that we did choose. Nova, everybody knows Nova, no words needed. We have 0. 0 is going to have 2 targets in this deck. In one. I really wanted to use this cute little variant that I unlocked on the collection log, and I've just never had an opportunity. This is the perfect opportunity. So 0 has 2 targets in this deck. So with 0 on reveal, remove the abilities of the next card that you play. 1 is going to be Ebony Maw. Ebony Maw is a very powerful 1-drop card. but the downside of it is you can't play cards there after you drop it. So 0 being a good target for our Ebony Maw or our Destroyer. So let's say we're in a position where we are heavily winning the other lanes, or maybe we didn't draw into armor, maybe we just don't want to destroy our cards. At the end of turn 5, we can drop something like Deathlock 0, and then turn 6 we can drop Destroyer to make sure that that ability did not trigger. And so then we have Bucky Barnes, who when destroyed turns into the Winter Soldier. So ideally we have Bucky Barnes somewhere in a lane that we don't destroy ahead of time. Then when we drop Destroyer, it flips that lane. Instead of losing power, we actually gain it by Destroyer's ability. So it's a pretty good card in combination with our Destroyer. Then we have Carnage as a destroy engine. We have armor to protect one of our lanes. We're going to want to drop this in a lane where we have things like a Rogue or a Moon Girl or our Ebony Maw, things that we don't want destroyed by the Destroyer. Then we have Wolverine. When this is discarded or destroyed, it goes to a random location. So even when Destroyer triggers, it's going to go somewhere else on the board. You're not going to lose that value or that power. Then we have Rogue, which I explained briefly. Rogue being really good in the ongoing meta, so it steals an ongoing ability from a random enemy card at that location. So that can be really powerful things like Iron Man, Devil Dinosaur, some other really, really powerful ongoing abilities that are very common right now. And then we have Moon Girl. So Moon Girl on reveal, duplicate your hands. We have a pretty low mana curve overall. The only card that's above 3 is our Destroyer in this deck. So Moon Girl seems like it fits pretty well. We can have 2 Bucky Barnes, 2 Novas, 2 Wolverines, 2 Sabretooths. We could even protect 2 lanes with armor. We can do a lot of things with Moon Girl, and this being a low mana curve deck, it should work that we can fit her in more often than not. The next card is one that I've never actually ran in a legitimate deck because I was like, why would you ever need this? Like, where would this be beneficial? So Sabretooth, when this is destroyed, return it to your hand. It costs 0. So it doesn't gain anything additional. It doesn't do anything. So I was like, why? Like, you already played the 3 mana. What do you get from it going to your hand and costing 0? Well, with this deck archetype, we could have technically 2 of them if we Moon Girled it in our hand that we can drop after Destroyer on turn 6. So we can do Destroyer, Sabretooth to get an additional 8 power out onto the board. And then we have Deathlock, which is another destruction mechanism. And then Destroyer, our bread and butter. Is this deck going to be the best? Probably not. I'm actually pretty nervous about this deck. Can it get some wins? I think probably. I think it'll sneak some wins away where the enemy's not expecting it. And then real quickly, just to cover the potential cards we considered, of course, Cosmo, which I explained, being that it would stop the on-reveal ability of Destroyer. We also considered Colossus. So Colossus being ongoing, you can't be destroyed or moved. That would allow him to be in a lane and we not have to worry about him getting killed by Destroyer. It just doesn't it doesn't necessarily feel better than any of the other choices we made. Maybe Ebony Maw, there might be an argument there. But Ebony Maw, if we're able to drop 1 before turn 3, that's a huge power swing to kind of help us. And that's really what I feel like this deck is lacking right now, is just an additional power generator. So we've met the requirement of how do we play our cards onto the board and not get them all destroyed, but the second criteria is how do we play them and have enough power to win. So Ebony Maw is here to do that, and I didn't feel like an additional 2-3 would really meet that requirement. All right, and with that being said, we are locked in. We are going to pilot this deck and see how it goes. Hopefully it's enjoyable. I am nervous because Destroyer is not one that I ever really thought about building a deck around. So it could go really, really well. Could also be pretty bad. So the game said that we are not going to get our customary first game against a bot in this scenario. And so we have some of our lower cost cards. I don't know that dropping Nova on turn 1 is necessarily the play there. It may be more beneficial to hold for like a Moon Girl, but I went ahead and kind of rolled the dice. I don't know. I don't feel like we're going to draw on a Moon Girl, and of course there's no way to know that. And then we have our Ebony Maw on turn 3, and we have 0. So we can play both of these. And so on turn 6, you can move cards to this location. So even if we end up getting an armor, I'd say we drop our armor here so that we can move cards over and not have to worry about the downside of Destroyer on turn 6. So for... oh man, so for this turn, we want to drop both Zero and Ebony Maw. But the question becomes where? We don't want to drop anything in the Gila, but we also don't really want to eliminate the possibility of these being destroyed. So maybe we drop these here, we wait for that destruction mechanism until turn 6, being Destroyer, and we leave these out in the open on that turn 6, and then we move our higher power or higher value cards over. I think that's what we end up doing here. So let's go ahead and drop Zero, who's going to take away the downside or the negative of our Ebony Maw. And even if not, we just filled up the lane, so not necessary, but helpful nonetheless. And so then we do have a destruction mechanism here. I do think we go ahead and drop our armor this turn and see what we draw into next turn. I would like to be able to... Actually, do we drop... I think we drop our Sabretooth this turn. Next turn, depending on what we drop Deathlock and then followed by armor in this lane. That will return Sabretooth to our hand at a 0 cost. And I think with this deck, we want to draw into Destroyer. And if we don't, it feels a little bit worse for wear, right? But I think we need to play like we're going to draw into Destroyer. And so with that, we want a 0 cost Sabretooth in our hand to get some additional value out on that last turn. And then we do draw into Destroyer. Good. Okay. So this could turn out. He has a move deck which is able to kind of sneak and cheat a lot of power out onto the board. So I think it'll be close. But yeah, we're gonna drop our Deathlock and then into our armor, which will return this to our hand at 0 cost. And then we'll leave these for Destroyer fodder on turn 6. So I think this is a pretty good line. And so Electra, oh, interesting. He destroyed our Nova for us, which is a little bit early. We would have liked to get some additional value, but we still get the value out of it. So that's not bad. And then we return a 0 cost 6 power Sabretooth. So that's actually maybe even better. No, it's probably not better, but it's not worse either. Okay, so we have some decisions. They dropped Cloak in this middle lane, and I don't even know how to begin to anticipate what is gonna happen. So I think he moves multiple man here. I think he moves multiple man here, and then that almost takes up all of his spaces, and then drops a Heimdall. But calculating how much that'll be, I don't know. So I think we need to go with our original plan. We move these cards over, and then we're going to drop our Destroyer in the middle as well as our Sabretooth in that middle lane to try and compete. I think we're going to be able to compete with this far right lane. If they drop Heimdall, Heimdall is really difficult to play because the opponent can kind of read that and know and anticipate. But I think if we drop it this way, 20 power is pretty hard to compete with. And then we get this 6 power somewhere. Wherever it ends up flowing is okay. But I think this is our best play. And so can this Destroyer deck work? I think this is not what I thought was going to happen at all. He did so many moves and didn't drop any cards. Am I looking at that right? There's no way. Quiritus? Is that? I don't know if I'm saying that. Quiritus, if you're watching this, did you forget to play or did you not have a good play line? What happened there? I'm interested to know. But either way, our destroyer deck comes out, and it comes out pretty solid. If you're able to get some of these things going, it feels like it is pretty strong. Like, I still don't know how, but all of these things work together pretty well. So let's see if we can keep repeating that. So before I resumed the recording, Sakar came in. It did trigger his Ant-Man and our Wolverine into that first location. And so that's not bad. The Sanctum Sanctorum is not bad for us. We can try or attempt to trigger Wolverine to shoot over into that location to try and get some upside. So we have a potential way to get power in there. It's a little inconsistent because Wolverine can go back to the lane that he came from or any of the other lanes that are available. So we get Bucky Barnes on the Shadowland location. I think for this one we end up dropping our Sabretooth, and then next turn, let's say we draw Carnage, we can drop all of them. It allows us to play around and use the most mana possible for that destruction lane. And the goal behind this lane is to take out the cards that are there, and we do draw into the Carnage. It's like it's meant to be. So we will be able to get our max Carnage buff without a Nova, and then all we have to do is either hope that we draw into our armor or have the last card that we drop next turn be 0. And that's most likely what will happen. That way we can take away the ability of our destroyer. So unfortunately that would mean that Wolverine is not going to get triggered and potentially move, and leaving the Sanctum Sanctorum open. And so looking at our play line, I think, and depending what we draw. So we have Deathlock in our deck still that would be able to potentially trigger, but we also have some other dead draws. We have Destroyer. I think we have to play this as if we were not going to be able to destroy this lane. And so what I'm going to do is drop our Nova, our Moon Girl, and our 0 all on this turn. Then we only have 2 spaces to play in. So it may be safer to not play our Nova here, but I want to have it on the board just in case we do draw into a destruction mechanic or a destruction engine that we want to utilize. So if we draw into, let's say, Deathlock, we can drop our Sabretooth over in this right lane first, and then drop Deathlock over here to kill these cards, trigger the Nova buff and the Wolverine to potentially go somewhere else. So we don't have Destroyer, so Deathlock, perfect. Well, I guess not perfect, but not bad. So let's go ahead and do our 0 ability to take away Sabretooth. Sabretooth's ability, which on the last turn, Sabretooth's ability does not matter. And then I say we drop our Deathlock. I think that is going to be our best bet. So they're going to drop something somewhat decent here, I assume. And it looks like they're running some kind of swarm deck. But if we trigger this is still 7 at the 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So it's still 12 if Wolverine does not go into this lane. And then if it goes over here, we of course win that lane. I think we win this. I think we're pretty confident. So we snap and let it play out. And maybe I shouldn't have snapped because I do want to see how this resolves. But in a normal game, if I was not worried about how it resolves, I would have snapped. So we do get our Sabretooth. Our Deathlock is going to start destroying this lane. Our Wolverine does go into the middle, perfect. So that swings that lane for us. They drop something big on Shadowland, but I don't think it's going to be enough to swing it for them because they also drop Strong Guy. So they drop an armor, which is not, of course, not going to be enough to swing this in their favor. So overall, a second victory with this Destroyer deck, even though our Destroyer got Yondu'd. This deck feels This deck is something else, guys. I wouldn't say that it's great or maybe even good, but can it win? Yeah, it can. All right, so we finally get to go against another human player. We've been on a streak of bot games. I think it was something like 4 bot games in a row, and I don't like to bring those necessarily just because they're a little bit easier to navigate and a little bit easier to win. Even if the bot has a good deck, a lot of times it is very telegraphed. You know what they're going to be doing and win. So I think I'm going to protect our monster in this lane just to avoid the downside of dropping our destroyer and him getting destroyed naturally. So I think that's what we want to do. We kind of lean into this mid lane and try to win this one out. And so depending on our third location, Shadowland, we really need to draw into a way to destroy our Sabertooth here. But I think we lean in. I think we go with the Sabertooth. I don't see another good play line. We don't have a good... Oh, and they have a Black Widow. That's a card that I am really looking forward to getting. I think it'd be really good in our debris junk deck. But we just haven't been able to pick it up yet. And so that stops us from drawing, and that does a lot of damage, and we have to put this onto the board. So with us not having the key cards that we need already, that's a little bit rough. So I think we just throw Widow's Bite over here into the Dream Dimension. It's okay if it gets destroyed. If not, we're not pushed for space with this deck. And so then we're going to go ahead and throw Wolverine down and just hope that we draw into one of our destroy mechanisms, because we're going to need it. We're going to need it if we have a chance of winning here. And so they do a Jubilee Chavez combo. We do draw into our Carnage, which will allow us to hopefully send Wolverine here. It will allow us to have a 0-cost Sabertooth. We're not going to be able to duplicate it, unfortunately, because of the Dream Dimension location, but at least we're able to destroy these cards. And then we can see, if he plays something with an ongoing ability, maybe we forego Destroyer on turn 6 and we go with something else. And so Wolverine does... Oh, that's perfect! That's beautiful. That is exactly what we needed. So now what do we anticipate them playing? What high power cards and where? So far they've done a Jubilee, a Chavez. I anticipate, So I think we do this. So if I was in their shoes and I had one really high powered card, I would drop it here. Now we could go with the Destroyer in this lane to hope that they assume that they have this one won, and then they drop a high power card in either one of these two and we win. But then if they're dropping a lot of small cards and we end up losing that one, that would feel really, really bad. So I think I just go with the safe play of expanding our lead here. So if they drop a Hulk, if they drop a Magneto, Magneto might mess us up, huh? Pulling some 3 costs around. But we lock in here. That is one way to win a game. I think we were overthinking it, trying to anticipate too much, and they didn't have a big enough hand. So I think they probably had like one big powerhouse unit, and they knew it would probably be enough to swing those lanes. I don't know, but a win is a win. So we're going against Poison 72, who did not pass the bot check. But we do draw into a Bucky Barnes Quinjet. A pull 3 card that I have yet to unlock, so they're rubbing it in. Pretty good for like collector type decks, or something I'd be interested in kind of playing around with and checking out. So we did draw into Bucky Barnes. I think we drop him here, and then we kind of stack some other things with him. So that being like Sabretooth, and then maybe turn 4 we drop our Carnage to destroy it. It just depends on what we end up drawing into here. So we do draw into Moon Girl. So I think we go ahead and use the Elysium bonus. So his cards are going to be dirt cheap with this Quinjet. So things like that he pulls with Cable, Mantis, all of the likes are going to be really, really cheap. He's going to have it reduced by 2. But I think we drop the Carnage to trigger the Bucky Barnes, get Sabretooth in our hand for free, and then we'll drop the Moon Girl to duplicate the Sabretooth as well. And so he drops the Collector and an Agent 13. So he does have quite a bit of upside from the Quinjet. But I don't think it's enough to really make this game an absolute loss. I think it's definitely winnable. So in hand we now have Sabretooth. How do we play? So we are going to be able to get a 0 destroyer off. So I think that's good to know. Do we drop our Deathlock here and then drop our Moon Girl to duplicate these? Yeah, then we get 2 destroyers off. Absolutely. Because we'll be able to get 2 with the reduced cost. We'll be able to do a 0 power 0 as well as a 5 power or 5 cost destroyer into turn 6 doing the exact same thing. And we have our free Sabretooth that we can play at any point. So amazing playline. We drew into it. Like you can't ask for a better hand, I don't think. And so could we top deck into Rogue? Maybe, and it maybe end up being more beneficial. So he got our Wolverine. So it's an Ebony Maw, so not anything we have to worry about. I think we do 0 destroyer here. It reveals them in the order that you played them, right? I sure hope so. I sure hope so. This is not an interaction that I've used much of, so we could lose the game because of this. But I think we let it be a surprise that we have a destroyer, because that's a massive powerhouse. So we're gonna have 17 on this lane already, and we have to anticipate. A Nova Carnage, at least one, which could be this here. Okay, so we do. So even if he Moon Girls, oh, he's not going to be able to get max cards. So even if he Moon Girls, and maybe he can with Sentinel and something else. Even if he Moon Girls, I think we win this lane if we have the power here. If we have this power here, I think that makes it really hard for him to compete. And I think we go ahead and just drop our power into this lane instead of trying to spread it out. I think we might be able to swing this one. I think it's safer to drop it all here, knowing that we only have to win 2, and most likely we'll be able to swing this one unless he has some amazing buff that we don't know about. Let's go ahead and snap back and see what he plays. I think we win this one. Okay, so the Devil Dino. I wouldn't be surprised if this is like a Sentinel and then a Nova and then a Carnage, maybe. But then he's not going to be able to Moon Girl, so we invested way too many resources over here. So the order does work, so it's the order that you play them in. So it's really good to know that our interaction here worked as intended. Okay, so Nova, Carnage, and then this is going to be Moon Girl to try and buff Devil Dinosaur back up, but it's not going to be enough. There's no way that oh, okay, never mind, Chavez. He only has 1 card. I kept trying to make Moon Girl happen, and it just didn't fit. But overall, so that was a much-needed 8-cube victory. We dropped the game just before this. We misread pretty hard. We had an avenue to win, but we misread it, and we ended up losing 8 cubes. So it was good to get those back. Okay, so in our opening hand, we have a pretty decent play line. With our Ebony Maw, we'll be able to drop him somewhere. We can get an early Nova buff if we want to, but we could also hold out and drop our Sabertooth. So no, we want to drop our Nova and then our Sabertooth because of the way the priority works. So we'll want to drop Nova probably next turn, followed by turn 3 Sabertooth. And so we'll go ahead and end this, but that's the tentative play. We drop our Nova, and then we drop Ebony Maw somewhere else, maybe. It just depends on what we pull. Ooh, and we get a Dr. Doom. Okay, so we did draw into Bucky Barnes, so that makes this a little bit more difficult. I think we have to play Bucky Barnes, and I think we go with the middle for our destruction mechanism, or our destruction lane. Because we're going to pull something into Grand Central, and I don't necessarily want that to be something that ruins our chances of running our destroyed deck. Bucky Barnes, next turn, maybe Nova. And so with Bucky Barnes and Nova being second, that will trigger the Winter Soldier. And then the Winter Soldier will get the buff when Nova is destroyed. So do we go to something like this, where we get Nova over into that lane? I think we go with not playing Ebony Maw here. I don't see a need to kind of squeeze him out onto the board, but Wolverine will start getting the Muir Island buff, and then when and if we do destroy him, he'll be a little bit more powerful to go around the board. And so now we have our Nova. Next turn, so next turn I will want to drop Dr. Doom because of the wave. Okay. Maybe not. We drew into our destroyer. That's so fortunate. So how do we want to play it though? And where do we want to play him? I've never been able to play our destroyer this early. Do we drop him into Muir Island, where it's usually a high traffic, high power lane? I think maybe we just drop him mid. We just send him down mid. And then we'll be able to drop Dr. Doom and some other cards in the following turns. Yeah, let's go with that. That will give us, actually, no, I changed my mind. Let's go with Destroyer on the left-hand side, because we're already going to have an 8-power Bucky Barnes in the mid lane to help us like start swinging that rocket. Oh my gosh! Oh no way! So he dropped Professor X, which unfortunately for him, we decided to switch over to Grand Central and drop our Destroyer. So our Destroyer is locked in there. He has Sunspot, which of course can grow. It's not a bad combo with Sunspot, but that is a lot of power to overcome. Yep. That is very unfortunate that we dropped such a powerhouse over there. So Professor X being one of those cards that's really, really swingy. If it works and works well, great. But a lot of times it doesn't, and it can lose you the game. So it almost becomes an instant concede at that point, because he would have had to pass 11 power in the next couple turns, and so then he would have had to given up tempo and value in the other lanes. All right, guys, so I'm gonna go ahead and end the video here. That was a wild ride. There were a lot of 8-cube games. There was at least 5 8-cube games. I think I'm only gonna showcase maybe 1 or 2, but there was one where the biggest misplay. I had 2 avenues to win, and I missed them both. And we ended up losing the 8-cube game, but overall, this deck felt a lot more playable than I thought it would. When I first pulled Destroyer, I almost thought about just forming a different deck around other cards that I've unlocked, but I decided to go ahead and give it a shot. I decided to lean in and, really try to stick to the nature of this series and build a deck out of what we had when we had it, instead of waiting till we got Death and a few other cool destruction type cards. But either way, this deck felt a lot more playable than I thought it would. And overall, it was a lot of fun. The swings were really intense, and so if you're looking for a fun deck, not necessarily one that's like straightforward, that's going to be a powerhouse and win the majority of the time, being like Devil Dino or those really overpowered kind of archetypes, this one is a fun secondary. It can pump out a lot more power on turn 6 than I thought. And so if you're able to have a lane at least competitive with armor in it, you can really swing the game on that turn 6 by doing some like double saber-tooth destroyer nonsense. But overall, it feels really solid and really fun to play. So I am going to go ahead and end the video here. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like, please leave a comment. I love interacting with you guys and responding to as much feedback as I can. And if you're not subscribed and you're enjoying the content and you made it all the way to the end of this video, one, kudos to you, but two, maybe consider subscribing, because if you made it to the end, I hope you liked it. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and end the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This has been TLSG. Later.